If you've been playing multiplayer games online or watching esports in the last 10 years, you'll more than likely have come across someone talking about the meta in relation to how people are playing a game. The meta, or metagaming, describes the characters, items, weapons, or way of playing a game that is widely accepted as the most dominant and most effective way to progress and win. It sort of encompasses the collective player psychology, with the majority of a game's user base gravitating to a small number of variations of ways to play and actively compete in a game. Now, if you're trying to compete with the top players in any sport or activity, you want to have the same chance at competing as anyone else does. But in competitive gaming, this can be a difficult goal to achieve. In something like a first-person shooter, for example, a player's ability to compete and win gunfights with other players depends primarily on the weapon they are using. There is, of course, the differing levels of skill and ability needed to play these games in the first place, but assuming the players are at a level where the variations in skill level are negligible, choice of weapon or loadout in general can mean winning or losing. This can lead to a select number of viable options for choosing weapons when playing. Take something like Call of Duty, where there might be over 30 guns to use in the game, but perhaps only 4 that are accepted in order to compete at the highest level. Picking anything else other than the meta option will directly impact your ability to beat other players and win. And there's nothing really wrong with this at first glance. It's an incredibly difficult task to completely balance a game so that every option available to the player is suitably competitive. It's natural that only a few weapons, playstyles, or characters rise to the top as the most dominant option to use. And I would say for competitive gaming and esports, this is probably preferred as opposed to having to consider the endless combinations players could use and working out how to approach playing with them. But although competitive gaming has exploded in popularity over the last 10 years, the majority of people playing games are not doing it to compete at the highest level. The casual player is the primary user of pretty much every title you can name, and maybe they're able to play at a decent level of skill, but they play mainly for escapism and fun, not for the competition. It is still of course in their interest to use the best weapons and characters available, as no one likes losing, so even though they're playing for fun, they may still be researching online for the best way to play the game so they have an advantage over others who don't. But this leads to a sort of stalemate in the game. When nearly everyone is using the same small number of options to play, the game begins to feel uninteresting. When it first released, there were all these options for the players to choose from. They could choose from a weapon for close quarters, long range, or a hybrid of the two. They could focus more on stealth or on all-out attack, and they could fine-tune their experience to match their unique playstyle. But when a meta begins to formulate, everyone starts to converge on limited options that they know can compete most effectively. The individuality of the players begins to diminish and fade, and matches begin to feel repetitive and boring. Every encounter feels like a carbon copy of the last, with the current overpowered weapon being overused and abused, and punishing anyone who attempts to try and play with a different approach. I'm not criticising the players who follow this meta. If there's a weapon or way of playing that can give them an advantage over others, I can totally understand why they would use it. It's just when you give in to this meta and join the masses, there's a perpetuation of the problem. It sort of reminds me of that quote from The Incredibles.
And when everyone's super, no one will be.
So what's my point for all of this? Well, when I first started playing multiplayer games, it felt like there was a different culture around finding these best options to use. Now, I'm not that old, and the internet was still around back then, but there wasn't a constant bombardment of videos, articles, TikToks, and streams to tune into surrounding the game you played. So the only way to work out what were the best guns in a Call of Duty or a Halo were for your own experiences in actually playing the game. You had to pick what you thought was the best option, try your luck and compete, and if you were bested by someone else playing a different way, you would try and replicate what they were doing or using to see if it was better than what you had before. I remember doing this myself, trying out all sorts of different combinations of weapons and perks, playing fast or slow, and it was a rewarding and exciting experience coming to my own conclusions. There was even a social aspect amongst my friends when we'd all discuss what we were using and what felt good or not good, and I'm sure many of our conclusions were similar to the meta that would have existed at the time, but because it wasn't so apparent to us, we still had our hallmarks of individuality and creativity in how we played. You knew which weapons were good and bad, but there wasn't such a definite consensus, and I think this was evident when you played games against others online. Of course you would see some common choices amongst other players, but there felt like a wider range rather than a select few. This could be a level of nostalgia peeking through and clouding my memory of this time, but I think it's a fair conclusion to draw considering the lesser use of the internet for information regarding a game back then, and my experiences of watching and listening to people talk about more recent games. When I would find my own way of playing in a game and pick the weapons that best suited me, it felt like a part of my character and personality was incorporated in how I play. The weapons I chose weren't the best in the game, but they were the best to me and for me to use. There wasn't a preconceived list of acceptable choices to pick from that were already drawn up by the game's community. Instead, I chose my way to play and enjoyed it. I wasn't another faceless opponent using a generic, generally agreed upon good way of playing. I played the game how I wanted, and I felt I had ownership over it. And this is really what I'm talking about when I criticise the idea of a meta in games. Everyone playing the exact same way or using the same things when the game is so much more than that and facilitates so much opportunity to play differently. This almost feels disrespectful to the developers and the work they put in to give us so much choice, only to whittle it down into a handful of viable options in order to compete. Maybe a part of the reason a meta exists is because of the developers' failings to properly balance a game, but I think there's also a level of responsibility we have as players to explore everything the game offers us to use and vary our default choices. It's a difficult problem to solve, because I can't tell people to pick explicitly worse ways of playing for the sake of being different, but the continual chase of the metagame and being the most dominant player based on what you use rather than skill is in my opinion only detrimental to the game's long-term health. As I've already mentioned multiple times, when a concrete meta is formed and supremely rigid, it makes the game boring and uninteresting both to watch and play. This has happened time and time again with titles that explode into popularity until there is a limited number of ways that a player can play the game competitively. Everyone has to conform to a strict playstyle, otherwise they risk losing and becoming uninterested in the game from that too. It's a zero-sum game, and it's also just disappointing to watch the potential of a game be unrealised purely because the players need to be the best. I know that a lot of people play these games to become the best, however short-lived it may be, but I feel there's a whole world of opportunity if the meta could be broadened or toned down so that a player can rise to the top with more individuality and not be forced into using an agreed-upon winning formula. Using a meta feels almost like a legal exploit of the game, and frankly it can feel cheap to win purely because of what you used rather than how you played. I don't know why this has meant so much to me to talk about. I think I started thinking about it with the upcoming release of Modern Warfare 2, where the discussions around the best weapons and ways to play are already well underway after the open beta, and the game isn't even releasing for another month. The original Modern Warfare 2 was a pivotal moment in my gaming journey, and it was the first game where I really immersed myself in playing online with others. So much of what made that time special was constantly thinking about what ways to play and improve my current loadouts so that I could get exactly my playstyle. I wasn't really concerned or worried about what everyone else was doing. I focused on my own experimentation and found what did and didn't work specifically for me. I remember even creating joke classes that involved playing as a ninja with only a throwing knife, and running silently around the map in a ghillie suit, which is something that most people would consider insane if done today. Now when I start playing games online, I already get a stream of information about what's good and not good without even playing. People I play with are telling me what's strong at the moment in the current meta, and I'll immediately dismiss something that's considered bad without really giving it a go myself. I'm a part of the problem, really. I follow the meta as well, and I'm sure many of you who play competitive games do the same, because there's this desire to compete at a good level and win. The meta in games isn't a bad thing. If you're trying to be the best at something, you want to know the best tools to get there. You want the playing field to be as level as possible, and you can't have someone having an advantage over you because of the gun they chose rather than their skill or ability. But next time you load up a game to play some multiplayer, stop and think about how you're playing. Do you consistently pick the same things over and over again, following the community as to what's good and bad? Maybe try a new character that you've never played as. Pick a special ability that no one uses, or add an attachment to your weapon that you didn't even know existed. You might surprise yourself, and maybe you'll discover an entirely new way to play. Maybe you'll lose a couple of games in the process, but maybe you'll win, and you'll win your way. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like, comment down below to join in on the conversation, and subscribe to see more videos from the channel.